"Sign it, Aunt Evelyn," Claire said, sliding the transfer papers across the hearing table. "Before someone else dies because you refuse to accept what you've become." The television cameras were close enough to catch the tremor in my left hand. Claire had arranged that. She stood beneath the bronze seal of Milwaukee City Hall in a cream suit, one palm over her heart, every inch the grieving public servant forced to protect a neighborhood from her confused elderly aunt. 48 tenants sat behind me. Across the chamber, developer Owen Pike wore the patient smile of a man waiting for demolition. I lowered my eyes to the signature line, then I reached into my handbag and placed a small red metal tag on top of the papers. Claire's smile changed by less than an inch. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. She said nothing. I turned the tag so its stamped number faced the cameras. "It came from the fire control valve beneath Mercer Court," I said. "The same valve that lost pressure 7 minutes before every fire you blamed on me." Her fingers tightened around the table. She thought I had come to surrender my building. She did not know I had brought the first piece of the trap. "Before I tell you how the girl I raised nearly burned down everything my husband and I built, let me know where you're listening from. If you have ever been dismissed because of your age, tap like and stay with me. Some people mistake patience for weakness until the evidence is placed in front of them. My name is Evelyn Mercer. I was 71 when my family tried to have me declared incompetent, remove me from my own property, and sell 48 homes to the highest bidder. For 32 years, I had owned Mercer Court, a 6-story Art Deco apartment building on Milwaukee's south side. Daniel and I bought it with a leaking roof and boarded windows. Everyone told us to tear it down. We restored it. Daniel understood brick, plaster, and stubborn old pipes. I understood fire. I had spent 28 years with the Milwaukee Fire Department, first as a firefighter and later as an investigator. Fire rarely begins where people think it does. Smoke lies, heat destroys careless details, but it cannot erase direction. If you know how to read what remains, a room will tell you what happened inside it. 6 years after Daniel's death, Mercer Court still sheltered retired teachers, hospital aides, widows, mechanics, and young families. Every September, we held a courtyard dinner to mark the night we signed the mortgage. The night everything began, paper lanterns hung between the fire escapes. Lena Ortiz brought trays of enchiladas. Children drew chalk suns across the bricks while old Motown played from a speaker on a windowsill. Claire arrived, 20 minutes late. She kissed my cheek and handed me white roses. "You should have let me arrange something more formal," she said, scanning the courtyard. "This place deserves a proper event. This is proper. Everyone who belongs here is here." Her smile held, but her eyes moved toward a patch of repaired brick on the west wall. Claire Walsh was my niece, though the word never described what she had been to me. After my sister died, Claire and her younger brother, Ben, came to live with us. I packed her lunches, attended her debates, paid her tuition, and sat in the front row when she became an alderwoman. In public, she called me Aunt Evelyn. At home, until recently, she had called me Mom. That evening, she brought Owen Pike, a developer who had purchased half a block nearby. His polished shoes looked offended by the old concrete. He shook my hand with both of his. "Mercer Court is a remarkable property," he said, building. I corrected. His smile widened. Of course, Ben emerged from the basement carrying a folding table. He had managed maintenance for nearly 11 years and rubbed the back of his neck when he was worried. "The laundry exhaust fan is acting up again," he told me. I thought Malik replaced the belt. He did. "This is electrical." I looked toward the basement windows. No smoke, no smell of overheated wiring, no flicker in the courtyard lights. "Shut the circuit down until morning. We'll inspect it in daylight." Claire touched my arm. "Ben can handle one fan, Aunt Evelyn." "I know he can." The words were simple. Her tone was not. Lena looked away. For the first time that evening, I felt like a guest at my own building. 10 minutes later, the alarm sounded. A hard electronic pulse came from the west corridor. Strobes flashed white against the brick. Conversations stopped. A child screamed. I smelled smoke before anyone saw it, a thin, bitter trace, pushing through the basement stairwell. "Everybody out through the north gate," I called. "Leave your food. Keep moving." Years disappeared from my body. My hearing aid squealed, but my mind became quiet. I counted residents as they moved. Lena gathered the children. Ben ran toward the basement door. I caught his sleeve, not without gear. The laundry room. The fire department is coming. Claire already had her phone raised. She was not calling emergency services, she was recording. Engine 14 arrived within minutes. Dark smoke filled the basement corridor, but the fire remained contained inside the laundry room. One dryer was destroyed, 2 walls were blackened, and part of the concrete ceiling had begun to crack above the hottest point. No one was injured. That should have comforted me. It did not. After the residents returned upstairs, I entered with the battalion chief. The apparent origin was behind a commercial dryer, beside a junction box Ben had called troublesome. It looked almost too convenient. Then I studied the water pattern. The sprinkler discharge had been weak at first. Soot remained where clean water should have struck the wall. The system had recovered pressure only after the fire had grown. I followed the main line into the pump room. A narrow paper chart turned inside the old mechanical pressure recorder Daniel had refused to replace. Most owners considered it obsolete. I trusted it because it did not depend on software, passwords, or anyone's version of events. I opened the glass cover and removed the strip. The ink line had held steady all evening. Then, 7 minutes before the alarm, it dropped sharply to almost nothing. Someone had cut the fire pressure before the flames began. I folded the pressure chart once and slipped it inside my coat before anyone else entered the pump room. That decision saved the building. At the time, I told myself I was only protecting an original record from soot, water, and careless hands. The truth was less flattering. I did not yet know whom I trusted. Ben appeared in the doorway, his face streaked with smoke. "What are you doing down here?" Looking at the system, the chief said the fire started behind the dryer. The chief said that was the apparent origin. Ben glanced toward the recorder. "Did the pump fail? Did you touch the main valve tonight?" His expression tightened. "No." The answer came too quickly. Before I could press him, Claire stepped into the corridor. Owen followed, covering his nose with a handkerchief. Claire looked from me to Ben. "What happened?" Pressure dropped before the alarm. She did not ask how far or for how long. She took my elbow instead. "You should not be down here breathing this air. I wore smoke for 28 years, and you have been retired for 14. Her voice carried concern, but her grip was firmer than necessary. She guided me toward the stairs while Owen watched the blackened laundry room like a man estimating renovation costs. By the time we reached the courtyard, 2 television crews had arrived. I had not called them. Claire moved toward the cameras and stood beneath the fire escape, with smoke drifting above her. She told a reporter that aging infrastructure had created a frightening emergency. Then she put one arm around me. "My aunt has devoted her life to this community," she said. "But no one person should carry the burden of managing a property this complex forever." The fire was not fully extinguished, and she was already building a story about my decline. Still, I defended her in my mind. Claire was a politician. Politicians filled silence because silence frightened voters. I told myself she was protecting Mercer Court from panic. I had made excuses for her since she was 9. My sister, Joanne, died in 1993 when a delivery truck crossed the center line on an icy road. Claire survived because she had stayed home with a fever. Ben had been at kindergarten. Daniel and I brought them into our house that week. Claire arrived carrying a purple backpack and one red mitten. She did not cry at the funeral. She sat between us, stared at the casket, and counted the brass handles under her breath. That was the first thing I learned about her. When she was afraid, she counted what she could control. Years later, when she won her first city election, she counted precincts the same way. Daniel taught Ben to change brake pads and helped Claire build student council signs. I handled school forms, dentist appointments, college applications, nightmares, and the quiet anger children carry when adults disappear. Claire had always been brilliant. She could walk into a room and identify what each person wanted to hear. As a child, that made her thoughtful. As an adult, it made her dangerous, though I would not admit that for years. After the fire, she stayed until nearly midnight. She brought coffee to firefighters, comforted residents, and arranged hotel rooms for tenants above the laundry room. Everything she did looked generous. That was why the first lie worked. The following morning, Claire, Ben, Inspector Nolan Briggs, and I met in my ground floor office. The room still held Daniel's drafting table and the dented cabinet where I kept the original plans. Nolan spread photographs across my desk. The junction box overheated, he said. Old cloth wiring. Heat transferred to lint behind the dryer. What about the sprinkler delay? The fire pump lost prime. It is a closed-loop system. Older equipment behaves unpredictably. No, people behave unpredictably. Pumps follow pressure. Claire set a paper cup beside me. Nolan has inspected municipal buildings for 23 years. And I investigated more than 400 fires. The room went quiet. Nolan pointed to a photograph showing the pump gauge at a low reading. There, that supports mechanical failure. I studied the image. The gauge face was dusty. A maintenance tag hung from the valve beside it. Who took this? My assistant, Nolan said, last night before or after the system recovered. During the inspection, Claire leaned back. On Evelyn, no one is accusing you of causing the fire. Not yet. Her mouth flattened. She then offered the explanation she had prepared. Ben had reported electrical trouble for weeks. I had delayed a full replacement because the cost would force a rent increase. The pump was nearly 30 years old. The building had survived because the alarm worked, and firefighters arrived quickly. Every piece of it was true. That was what made the lie effective. Mercer Court operated on narrow margins because we kept rents below market. A full electrical upgrade would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Claire did not need to invent negligence. She only had to rearrange my decisions until they looked like incompetence. I can help, she said. My office has access to emergency redevelopment funds. Owen knows contractors who can start immediately. Owen gave a modest nod. I would be happy to assess the property at no charge. I looked at Claire. You brought a developer to a fire scene, and now he is offering to inspect my building. He was already at dinner. Yes, you brought him there too. For a moment, the concern left her face. Then she lowered her voice. Please do not turn this into something ugly. That sentence stayed with me because she made my suspicion sound like misconduct. The meeting ended with Nolan promising a formal report within 48 hours. Claire kissed my temple before leaving. Ben avoided my eyes. I locked the office door and removed the pressure chart from my coat. I laid it beside Nolan's photograph. The chart showed the pressure collapse at 7:43 p.m. I enlarged the photograph and examined the maintenance tag beside the gauge. In the lower corner, partly hidden by the valve wheel, was a printed date. September 11, the fire had occurred. On September 14, Nolan's inspection photograph had been taken 3 days before the fire. I printed Nolan's photograph and circled the date in red ink. Then I put both copies, the original image and the enlargement, inside Daniel's old fireproof document box. I did not call Claire, not yet. A date printed on a maintenance tag was suspicious, but it was not proof. Nolan could claim his assistant had reused an earlier photograph. He could call it a filing mistake. Claire could say I was searching for conspiracy, because I could not accept that Mercer Court needed repairs. I had spent too many years testifying in court to confuse an inconsistency with a conclusion. So I waited. The formal inspection report arrived the next afternoon by certified courier. It listed 23 deficiencies: obsolete wiring, corroded pipes, damaged fire doors, missing emergency light records, and inadequate maintenance documentation. Some were legitimate. Old buildings collect problems the way old people collect scars. Others were exaggerated. One fire door had a closing delay of 2 seconds. Nolan described it as non-functional. A stain beneath a pipe became evidence of active structural water intrusion. A cracked basement tile became a fall hazard requiring immediate area closure. At the bottom of the report, in bold letters, was a recommendation that Mercer Court be placed under temporary professional management until all safety issues were resolved. Claire called 5 minutes after I finished reading. I know it looks frightening, she said. It looks coordinated. Aunt Evelyn, your developer attends dinner. A fire starts. An inspector uses a photograph taken 3 days earlier. Now you are calling before. The report has been opened long enough for the ink to dry. She was silent for half a breath. Then her voice softened. This is exactly why I wanted to speak privately. You are tired, and you are connecting things that are not connected. There it was, not anger, not denial, diagnosis. I am not tired. You barely slept after the fire. How do you know? Ben told me. I looked through my office window toward the courtyard. Ben was replacing a smoke detector outside apartment 2B. He glanced at the glass and quickly turned away. Claire continued, "The city can impose its own administrator if we do nothing. I found a company willing to step in temporarily and keep Mercer Court operating." "You found one already?" "They manage several historic properties." "What company?" "North Harbor Residential." I knew the name. They managed 2 buildings Owen Pike had renovated near the river. "No, Aunt Evelyn, this is not a request." The words came cleanly, without warmth, then she caught herself. "I mean, the city may not leave us a choice. Mercer Court is privately owned and occupied by 48 households whose safety is a public concern." I closed the report. "You used to argue that government should not displace elderly tenants." "I still believe that." "Then stop helping a developer create the excuse." Her breath changed. I heard papers move on her desk. Owen offered contractors because he was standing there when the fire happened. That is all. The inspection photograph is dated 3 days before the fire. This time the silence lasted longer. When Claire spoke again, she sounded almost disappointed. "You are reading a date from a blurry picture and accusing everyone around you." "I accuse no one. You implied Nolan falsified a report. You suggested Owen planned a fire. And now you think I am involved because I made a phone call." I said the photograph was taken early. You hear how this sounds, don't you? I did. That was the problem. It sounded like an old woman collecting harmless mistakes and arranging them into a threat. Claire understood presentation better than truth. If she repeated my concerns to the right people, my caution would become paranoia before I entered the room. "I will review the management proposal," I said. Relief entered her voice immediately. "Thank you. That is all I am asking." She arrived at Mercer Court before 8 the next morning, with 4 North Harbor employees. I had not agreed to anything. They wore matching blue jackets and carried tablets, clipboards, and boxes of electronic locks. Their supervisor, a narrow man named Grant Ellis, introduced himself while 2 workers began measuring my office door. "What are they doing?" I asked. "Updating access control," Grant said. "Stop them." Claire stepped out of the elevator. "This is temporary. You said I would review a proposal. You said you would cooperate. That is not the same sentence." Tenants had begun gathering in the lobby. Claire lowered her voice, ensuring they had to strain to hear. "The city needs evidence that corrective action has started. North Harbor is here under an emergency stabilization agreement." "Signed by whom?" "The Owners Advisory Committee." "There is no Owners Advisory Committee. There is one owner." Ben came through the basement door carrying a cardboard box filled with old keys. I stared at him. "You gave them access?" He set the box on the front desk. "They need to inspect every utility space. You work for me." His face tightened. "I work for the building." Claire moved between us. "Please do not punish Ben for trying to protect the tenants." "I am not punishing him. I am asking why my locks are being changed without my permission." Lena Ortiz stood near the mailboxes with her arms folded. "Will residents receive new keys?" she asked. "Of course," Claire said. "No one is losing access to their home, only I was." That morning, North Harbor took control of the rent office, maintenance records, security system, and contractor scheduling. Grant asked me to surrender the master key ring Daniel had assembled 30 years earlier. I refused. Claire smiled in front of the tenants. "No one is taking anything from you, Aunt Evelyn. We are simply reducing the burden." She kept using that word burden, as though my authority were a heavy grocery bag a kind younger woman had offered to carry. By noon, a printed notice appeared beside the elevators. All media inquiries were to be directed to Alderwoman Claire Walsh's office. Residents and staff were instructed not to make public statements about the fire. My own name did not appear. I tore the notice down. 10 minutes later, another one replaced it. That evening, I waited until the North Harbor employees left. The building settled into its familiar rhythm televisions behind walls, dishes and sinks, pipes ticking as hot water moved upward. I took my master ring and walked to the basement. The pressure recorder was still there, turning quietly behind its glass cover. I wanted to examine the valve seal and compare it with the maintenance records before anyone could replace either one. At the pump room door, I inserted Daniel's brass master key. It stopped halfway. I tried another, then another. None of them turned. Someone had changed the lock on the most important room in my building, and whoever had done it no longer wanted me to see what was inside. I stood in the basement corridor with Daniel's keys hanging uselessly from my hand. The pump room had always been the one place in Mercer Court where nothing was improvised. Daniel had painted the floor, labeled every pipe, and mounted a clipboard beside the door for inspection notes. Even after he died, I kept the room exactly as he left it. Now a new silver cylinder sat in the lock, no warning, no duplicate key, no explanation. I found Ben in the maintenance shop replacing a cracked outlet cover. He did not look surprised when I held up the key ring. North Harbor changed the pump room lock, I said. They changed all restricted access locks. Without telling me, they told Claire. Claire does not own this building. Ben set down his screwdriver. She is trying to keep the city from shutting us down. She is helping strangers keep me out of my own fire control room. His shoulders rose and fell. Aunt Evelyn, you need to let people do their jobs. The words hurt more than I expected. Daniel and I had raised him. I had waited outside emergency rooms, taught him to drive, and paid for the technical program that gave him this job. Now he spoke, as though I were a tenant interfering with maintenance. Who authorized the change? I did. He looked ashamed. Claire said the city required controlled access after the fire. Grant brought the hardware. I signed the work order. Did you enter the pump room with them? No. Did you give them your access card? His gaze shifted toward the shelves. They issued new cards. That was not my question. He picked up the outlet cover again. I have work to do. I left before anger made me careless. The next morning I returned with Inspector Nolan Briggs and Grant Ellis from North Harbor. Claire joined by video call on Grant's tablet. She said she had a committee hearing downtown but wanted to be present because I had raised serious concerns. Nolan unlocked the pump room with an electronic card. The machinery hummed steadily. The pressure gauge read normal. The recorder continued feeding its narrow paper strip through the glass case. Everything looked clean. Too clean. The floor had been mopped. A fresh inspection sheet hung on Daniel's clipboard. The handwheel on the main isolation valve had been repainted bright red, covering the scratches I remembered after the fire. A wire seal ran through the valve's locking arm. Its metal tag carried a serial number and the city inspection stamp. I did not touch it. Who replaced the seal? I asked. Nolan leaned beside me. It was damaged during the emergency response. By whom? Fire crews move equipment. Things get knocked loose. A seal does not fall off because someone brushes against it. Grant folded his arms. Mrs. Mercer, the valve is secure now. I am asking about the old seal. Claire's voice came through the tablet. Is this truly necessary? Yes. I crouched and studied the wire. A proper tamper seal was threaded tightly enough that the tag could not rotate. This one spun. When the pump vibrated, the wire had been twisted by hand instead of crimped with the city tool. This is not a municipal seal. Nolan remained calm. It came from an approved supplier. It has the city stamp. Suppliers manufacture them for us. The serial format is wrong. Grant sighed. You are basing that on what? 28 years of seeing them. The tag read MFD 2477 Sunks. Milwaukee seals used a 2-letter district prefix followed by a 6-digit sequence. No department seal I had logged began with MFD and a year. Nolan straightened. The fire division updated its inventory system last spring. It was a plausible answer. It was also convenient. Show me the replacement record. I will request it. You signed the inspection sheet. I do not personally carry warehouse receipts. Claire moved closer to her camera. Aunt Evelyn, equipment changes, procedures change, numbers do not. I glanced at the chart recorder. The paper inside it began at 8 the previous morning. The earlier stripped the one covering the period after the fire was gone. Where are the previous charts? Grant looked toward Ben. Your maintenance manager removed them. Ben stood near the door, pale beneath the fluorescent lights. I filed them where? In the temporary office upstairs. We will look at them now. Claire's voice sharpened. There is no need to conduct an interrogation. I am inspecting records from my building. Your behavior is exactly what worries people. You are turning routine repairs into accusations. The statement was meant for an invisible audience. Attorneys, judges, reporters, anyone. Claire might later tell that I was becoming unstable. So I changed tactics. I let my shoulders drop. You may be right, I said. I have not slept well. Ben looked at me for the first time. Claire softened at once. We all want you to feel safe. I nodded and stepped away from the valve. Then I deliberately stumbled against the wall. Grant reached for my arm. While everyone watched my feet, I pressed my thumb against the underside of the tag. A faint gray residue came away on my skin. The city did not paint serial numbers onto its seals. They were stamped into bare aluminum. This one had been coated to look official. I apologized and allowed Ben to walk me upstairs. In the hallway, I told him I needed to rest. Instead, I went to my office and photographed the residue on my thumb before washing it away. That evening, someone slipped an envelope beneath my apartment door. Inside was a note in block letters. I did not know what they were doing. Meet me in the basement, laundry room at 11:30. Come alone at 11:28. I entered the darkened laundry room. Malik Reed stepped from behind the damaged dryers. He looked toward the corridor twice before speaking. I found this after North Harbor left, he whispered. He opened his palm. Resting there was a red metal valve with the same false city stamp and the same impossible serial format. I pulled it from their trash. Malik closed his fingers around the counterfeit seal as footsteps sounded beyond the laundry room. We both froze. The steps passed the basement stairwell and continued toward the storage cages. Malik released a breath. You should not have come alone, I whispered. You told people to stop treating you like you were helpless. That does not mean I want you risking your job. He looked at the damaged dryers. Grant's crew changed the valve seal the morning after the fire. One guy told me to throw away a bag from the pump room. That was inside. Did you see them touch the valve? No. Did you see who removed the original seal? No. His answers were honest, which made them less useful. Why did your note say you did not know what they were doing? I gave them access, he said. Grant claimed Ben's card was not activating the new locks. I opened the pump room. I thought they were checking the system. When? The afternoon before the fire. Grant's crew had enough time to alter the valve or learn the room's layout. Will you say that in front of an attorney? Malik stepped back. I cannot lose this job, Mrs. Mercer. My sister starts nursing school in January. I pay the rent. If someone tampered with the fire system, people could have died. I know I gave you the seal. That is all I can do. I should have hidden the evidence, called Laura Chen, and built the case quietly. Instead, I let anger choose the next move. The following evening, Claire held a residents' meeting in the community room. She stood beside a projected image of the inspection report, while Grant explained North Harbor's repair schedule. Folding chairs filled the room. Several tenants held insurance forms and lists of damaged belongings. Claire spoke about safety and restoring trust. She did not mention that I owned the building. When she invited questions, I rose from the back row. Lena turned toward me. Ben stopped writing. Malik stood near the exit. Why did North Harbor enter the pump room before the fire? I asked. Grant's expression remained neutral. We conducted a preliminary safety review. Who requested it? Alderwoman Walsh's office. Claire lifted a hand. After Ben reported electrical concerns, I asked Grant to look at the building generally. You did not tell me. I did not need your permission to request an informal opinion. You needed my permission to enter a locked utility room. Murmurs moved through the chairs. Claire smiled for the residents. We are not turning a safety meeting into a family argument. I walked to the front table and placed the false seal beneath the projector light. Then explain this. This carries a counterfeit city stamp, I said. It was found in North Harbor's trash after they replaced the seal on the main fire control valve. Grant picked it up. These are standard contractor lockout tags. It is designed to imitate a municipal tamper seal. No, Nolan Briggs said from the side of the room. I had not seen him enter. He examined the tag briefly. This is a temporary identification tag. Contractors use them while work is underway. Then why does it have a false inspection number? It is an inventory code. You told me the number came from the fire division's new system. I said the city updated its inventory process. I did not say every tag was city property. The distinction sounded prepared. I looked toward Malik. Tell them where you found it. His eyes widened. Claire followed my gaze. Malik. He stared at the floor in a trash bag. Whose? I do not know. You told me it came from North Harbor's crew. His throat moved. I said I saw them carrying bags. I did not see who put the tag inside. The room changed around me. A moment earlier, I had evidence and a witness. Now I was an angry woman holding painted metal, while a frightened young man denied my version of the conversation. Grant returned the seal. "With respect, Mrs. Mercer, you may have misunderstood him. My hearing is impaired. My memory is not." Claire came closer. "No one said it was. You have been saying it without using the word. Aunt Evelyn, you called yesterday at 6 in the morning and asked why the heat was off. The boiler controls had been disconnected for maintenance. It was 72 degrees outside." Claire turned toward the tenants. "She has accused Inspector Briggs of falsifying photographs. She has suggested Owen Pike planned a fire because he attended dinner. Tonight, she brought a discarded contractor tag and called it evidence of sabotage. Every fact was arranged to make me sound unwell. The pressure was deliberately cut 7 minutes before the fire." Claire looked at me with convincing sorrow. "Where is the chart proving that?" "I secured the original. Will you show it to us?" "Not until it is examined independently." "So no one else has seen it?" "I have." She nodded as though confirming a diagnosis. Nolan stepped forward. "Old mechanical charts can jump if the stylus catches or the paper feed slips. That is not evidence of interference. It dropped to almost zero. According to your interpretation." My temper broke. "My interpretation kept people out of burning buildings before you had a badge." The room went silent. Claire reached for my arm. "Please sit down." I pulled away. "Do not touch me." My hand struck the water pitcher. It tipped, sending water across Claire's papers. Several residents gasped. It was an accident. It did not matter. Claire stepped back as if I had threatened her. Ben hurried forward with towels. Lena watched me with worry I had never seen before. I left without another word. The next morning, a process server waited outside my apartment. He handed me an envelope bearing the seal of the Milwaukee County Circuit Court. Claire had filed an emergency petition, asking a judge to declare me incapable of managing my property, finances, and personal safety. Attached was a sworn statement from my own nephew. Ben had signed that I was becoming dangerous. Ben's signature sat beneath 3 pages of carefully selected memories. He wrote that I had become forgetful after Daniel died, that I sometimes repeated questions, that I had entered restricted areas after being told they were unsafe, that I had frightened residents by accusing city officials of sabotage without evidence. He also described the water pitcher at the meeting. He did not mention that Claire had changed my locks, taken control of my records, or arranged for a developer's management company to enter the building before the fire. The petition requested temporary guardianship over my finances and authority to make decisions concerning Mercer Court. Claire claimed immediate intervention was necessary because my deteriorating judgment placed dozens of vulnerable tenants at risk. A hearing had been scheduled for the following Monday. 5 days away, I read Ben's statement twice, then placed it on my kitchen table and made coffee. For 30 years, when an investigation turned personal, I followed the same rule. Identify what the evidence proved, what it only suggested, and what pain was trying to make me believe. The petition proved Claire was moving against me. It suggested Ben had chosen her side. The pain told me neither of them had ever loved me. I refused to let pain write the final report. At 9 that morning, I called Laura Chen. Laura and I had met 17 years earlier after a nursing home fire killed 2 residents. I investigated the origin. She represented the families. We argued for months because she believed the building owner had ignored obvious warnings, while I believed the fire marshal's office had approved repairs that were never completed. We were both right. That case taught us to respect each other. Her office occupied the 2nd floor above a bakery on National Avenue. It had no marble lobby, no wall of awards, and no receptionist trained to make frightened people wait. Laura opened the door herself. She was 62, small, silver-haired, and direct enough to make politeness feel inefficient. "You confronted them," she said after reading the petition. "I presented evidence. You presented an object no expert had authenticated and called a young employee to speak without warning. He told me what he saw privately, while afraid. Then you placed him in a room with his employer, a city inspector and an alderwoman. I looked toward the window. I made a mistake. Yes, Laura did not soften the word. That mistake can be repaired. The next one may cost you control of the building." She explained how the guardianship petition would work. Claire did not need to prove I had dementia. She only needed to convince the court that immediate temporary authority was necessary to prevent harm while a longer evaluation proceeded. The inspection report helped her. The residents' meeting helped her more. If you walk into court angry, Laura said, Claire will let you speak until you build her case for her. What am I supposed to do? Smile while she calls me incompetent. You are supposed to stop fighting the story she wants in public. I understood before she finished. In an arson investigation, smoke often pulled attention away from the true point of origin. Claire was filling every room with smoke, my age, my grief, my hearing, my temper. I had been chasing it. What do you need? I asked. The original pressure chart, every access record you can lawfully obtain, maintenance reports, copies of Claire's communications with North Harbor. And time, we have 5 days, then buy us more. How? Laura folded the petition. Give Claire something she wants. I returned to Mercer Court just after lunch. North Harbor had placed a new desk in the lobby. Grant sat behind it reviewing work orders. He stood when he saw me, expecting a confrontation. I let my shoulders sag. I owe you an apology, I said. His suspicion showed before his relief. For what? For making your work harder. The fire frightened me. Claire arrived 20 minutes later, exactly as I expected. Grant must have called her. She entered my office slowly, as though approaching an injured animal. Aunt Evelyn. I remained seated behind Daniel's drafting table. I read the petition. Her expression became solemn. I did not want to do this. Ben signed it. He is worried, I know. That answer unsettled her. I removed my glasses and rubbed my eyes. I have been tired. I have not slept properly since the anniversary. Maybe I saw patterns because I needed something to blame. Claire sat across from me. We can pause the court filing if you cooperate with an evaluation. Will you let me remain in my apartment? Of course, and no one raises the tenants' rents while this is resolved. She reached across the desk and took my hand. I promise. Her skin was warm, her grip was steady. I wondered how many times she had practiced looking sincere. I want Ben to handle maintenance, I said. He knows the building, we can discuss that. No, that matters to me. Claire hesitated, then nodded. It was the first useful thing she gave me. Ben had become a weakness, not because he was loyal to me. I no longer knew whether he was. But Claire still needed his name attached to the building. North Harbor could change locks and issue reports, but Ben's presence made the takeover look like family protection instead of outside seizure. I spent the rest of the afternoon performing surrender. I misplaced my glasses in front of Grant. I asked the same question twice. I allowed Claire to remind me of an appointment I had never forgotten. People relax around weakness. By evening, North Harbor stopped escorting me through the office. Ben received access to the maintenance files again. Claire believed she had won enough to become careless. After midnight, I entered the basement records room using an old service key North Harbor had overlooked. I copied 3 months of work orders and pump inspection schedules. Then I returned to my apartment and spread them across the floor. I marked every pressure fluctuation recorded by the mechanical system. 4 in total. Beside them, I placed public calendars from Claire's committee office. Each pressure loss occurred within 6 hours of a closed-door redevelopment meeting. 4 different dates, the same pattern, and on every one of those evenings, Owen Pike had been inside City Hall with Claire. At 8 the next morning, I carried the copied work orders, the committee calendars, and the original pressure chart to Laura's office in a grocery bag. I did not trust briefcases anymore. Claire knew I owned one. Laura spread the records across her conference table and read without speaking. She placed a yellow tab beside each pressure loss, then a blue tab beside each closed-door redevelopment meeting. 4 matches, she said. Within 6 hours, that is a pattern. It is not yet a case. I know, she looked at me over her glasses. You are learning. I learned this lesson before you were born. No, you knew it before this became your family. That was different, and we both understood it. Laura had invited someone else to the meeting. His name was Raymond Cole, a retired fire protection engineer who now consulted for insurance carriers, housing cooperatives, and municipal investigators. He was 68, broad-shouldered, and carried a canvas tool bag that looked older than Malik. Raymond did not begin with introductions. He examined the original chart under a magnifying lamp. Recorder calibrated recently. He asked, 11 months ago, any history of pump cavitation? No frozen supply line? Not in September, utility interruption? Street pressure remained normal. He traced the ink line with one blunt finger. This is not a stylus jump. Laura leaned closer. Why not? A stuck stylus produces a vertical mark when it releases. This line descends smoothly over 19 seconds, stays low for 6 minutes and 48 seconds, then recovers in stages, meaning someone restricted flow and reopened it gradually. The words settled over the table. For the first time, another qualified person had looked at the chart and seen what I saw. Raymond continued, if the main isolation valve had been fully closed, alarms should have activated. Whoever did this likely used the bypass assembly or partially closed the test header. Enough pressure remained to avoid an immediate supervisory signal, but not enough for strong sprinkler discharge. Could it have happened accidentally? Laura asked, once perhaps, 4 times around the same set of meetings. No, he looked at me, who understands the system? Ben Malik, North Harbor's contractors. Anyone who studied the plans, and you, yes, he did not apologize for including me. Good investigators never protect a theory from uncomfortable possibilities. Laura photographed the chart and placed it in an archival sleeve. Raymond signed a receipt stating that he had inspected the original without altering it. Every movement was documented. That was the difference between suspicion and evidence. Suspicion asks to be believed. Evidence survives being challenged. We could not enter the pump room without alerting Claire, but Laura had another route. Because Mercer Court housed elderly and disabled tenants, she submitted a formal safety complaint to the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services and requested an independent review of the fire suppression system. She did not accuse Claire of sabotage. She attached the pressure chart and asked whether the documented fluctuations created a present hazard. By afternoon, a state fire investigator named Anita Morales called. She would not discuss criminal theories. She would, however, authorize a preservation request for all pump records, access logs, work orders, and inspection photographs related to the building. Claire could ignore me. Destroying records after a state preservation notice was a different matter. The notice reached North Harbor at 4:17 p.m. At 4:26, Claire called. I let it ring 6 times before answering. Are you trying to have Mercer Court closed? She asked. Her concern had vanished. I reported a fire safety problem. You submitted documents to the state without consulting management. I am the owner. You agreed to cooperate. I agreed to rest. I did not agree to let evidence disappear. What evidence? The pressure records. A pause. Then her voice softened again. Aunt Evelyn, Laura Chen is using your fear to create a legal battle. She has always hated redevelopment projects. Laura represents clients. She does not need to love buildings. This could force a full evacuation. Then perhaps someone should explain why the pressure keeps dropping. She exhaled slowly. I am coming over. No, I think we should talk in person. I am tired. I used the word deliberately. She had used it against me often enough. For once, it worked. Claire did not come. At 7, Ben knocked on my apartment door. He looked as though he had not slept. Did you contact the state? Yes, you should have told me. Would you have told Claire? His jaw tightened. She is trying to keep this place open, so am I. You do not understand what happens if the state finds major violations. They can condemn the building. People could lose their homes. That is exactly why we need the truth. He moved past me into the apartment without being invited and lowered his voice. Withdraw the complaint. No, Aunt Evelyn, please. There was fear in him now, not irritation, not embarrassment, fear. Who are you protecting? I asked. No one. Then what are you afraid of? He looked toward the hallway, though the door was closed. Claire said North Harbor will cover the repairs. She has funding lined up. If you keep pushing, the financing disappears. What financing? I do not know. Then how do you know it disappears? He rubbed both hands over his face. Because she told me. I stepped closer. What did you give her? His hands dropped. Nothing. Your statement helped her file for guardianship. Your authorization let North Harbor change the locks. What else did you give her? He stared at me for a long moment. Then he left without answering. The next morning, Anita Morales arrived with Raymond and a state technician. Claire could not legally prevent their inspection. North Harbor produced the pump room access report from its electronic lock system. Grant printed it while I stood beside the lobby desk. The report listed every badge used since installation. Most entries were expected: Grant, Nolan, 2 contractors, Ben and Malik. Raymond compared the access times with the pressure fluctuations. The first 3 incidents had occurred before the electronic system was installed. The fourth had not. At 2:14 on the morning before the laundry room fire, someone entered the pump room for 11 minutes. No work order had been issued, no inspection was scheduled. The badge number belonged to Ben. Ben stared at the access report, as though the number might change if he waited long enough. "It was not me," he said. Grant Ellis folded his arms. "The system records the badge identifier, date and time. I know how the system works. Then you understand what it shows." Anita Morales took the printout from Grant and placed it inside a clear evidence sleeve. "Where was your badge that night?" she asked. Ben rubbed his thumb along the edge of his belt. "In my wallet." "Where was the wallet?" "At home." "Who had access to it?" "No one." Claire entered the lobby before he could say more. She wore a dark green coat over her council clothes and carried 2 phones. Nolan Briggs followed close behind her. Their timing told me Grant had called the moment the state investigators found the record. Claire looked first at Ben, then at the sealed report. "What is happening?" Anita answered. "We found an unauthorized entry into the pump room before the laundry fire." Claire's eyes widened with convincing surprise. "By whom?" "The badge was assigned to Mr. Walsh." Ben turned toward her. "I did not go down there." Claire reached for his arm. "Of course you did not." She defended him too quickly. Anita noticed it as well. "Badge systems are not infallible," Claire continued. "Cards can be copied, data can be corrupted." Grant nodded. "We had software problems during installation." "You told me it was fully operational," I said. "It was operational. That does not mean there were no syncing errors." Raymond Cole stepped toward the pump room door. "A syncing error can delay an upload. It cannot create an 11-minute entry that never happened." Nolan cleared his throat. "We are moving far beyond a routine safety inspection. If the state believes criminal interference occurred, the building should be emptied until the system is secured." Claire turned to him. "Is that necessary?" "It was a good performance." She looked reluctant to displace tenants. Nolan was equally careful. "I am concerned about public safety." That phrase could excuse almost anything. Anita did not support him. "The system is currently holding pressure. We have not completed our inspection." Nolan's mouth tightened. "I am the city inspector of record, and I am conducting a state review." For several seconds, the lobby became a quiet contest over jurisdiction. Then a loud metallic impact came from inside the wall. Everyone turned. A second sound followed, deeper and heavier than the building seemed to exhale. Water burst through the ceiling above the east corridor. It struck the tile in a solid sheet, knocking loose a light fixture and sending tenants running from their apartments. Within seconds, brown water poured through the lobby, carrying pieces of plaster and insulation. "Shut off the domestic main," I shouted. Ben ran toward the basement. Grant grabbed his shoulder. "You are not authorized to enter the mechanical rooms." Ben shoved him away. "It is my building system." "No," Claire said. "Let North Harbor handle it." Another section of ceiling collapsed. Lena Ortiz appeared at the stairwell, with 2 elderly residents behind her. "Water is coming through the walls on 3, she called. "Mrs. Novak cannot get her oxygen machine unplugged." I moved toward the stairs. Claire blocked me. "Stay here. There are people upstairs. Emergency crews are coming. I know where the shut-off zones are. You are not going into a flooded building at your age." Her voice carried through the lobby. "At your age." Every tenant heard it. Ben ran downstairs before anyone could stop him. Raymond followed with Anita. Malik began guiding residents toward the courtyard. I went with him. Claire called my name, but I did not turn. The rupture had occurred in the building's old standpipe riser, a vertical pipe running from the basement to the upper floors. It did not feed drinking water. It supplied hose connections for firefighters. The line should not have been under enough pressure to rupture without warning. By the time the fire department isolated it, 12 apartments had water damage. 2 residents were taken to the hospital for observation. Mrs. Novak lost access to her oxygen concentrator for less than 4 minutes. but the sight of her trembling beneath a firefighter's blanket became the image every television station used that evening. Claire stood in front of Mercer Court and told reporters that the disaster confirmed her worst fears. "My aunt is a beloved member of this community," she said. "But love cannot repair a failing building. Sentiment cannot replace professional oversight." She did not mention that North Harbor had controlled the mechanical rooms for 4 days. Nolan issued an emergency order before the floors were dry. Every resident had to leave Mercer Court by 8 that evening. The city arranged temporary shelter in 2 hotels and a converted rehabilitation center. Claire presented the relocation as an act of compassion. Cameras followed her as she carried Lena's suitcase to a waiting bus. I watched from beneath the lobby awning. Lena stopped beside me. "Did Claire cause this too?" she asked quietly. "I do not know yet." It was the only honest answer. She studied my face. "I want to believe you, then do not believe me. Watch what people do." Across the sidewalk, Claire embraced Mrs. Novak while a photographer crouched to capture the moment. Lena followed my gaze. "I see." By sunset, Mercer Court was empty except for city personnel, North Harbor contractors, and Ben. I found him in the maintenance shop packing tools into a plastic crate. "Your badge," I said. "I told you it was not me." "Did Claire ever borrow your wallet?" "No." "Did Grant photograph your card?" "I do not know." "Did you leave it in the office?" He slammed a wrench into the crate. "I am not working against you. That is not the same as working for me." He looked exhausted. "You think everything is a fire investigation. Sometimes old pipes break. Sometimes they are weakened first." He stopped moving. "What are you saying?" "The ruptured section was replaced 8 years ago. It should have outlasted both of us." Before he could answer, Claire entered with Nolan and a man carrying a portable printer. Nolan placed a new order on the workbench. Mercer Court must correct all critical fire, electrical, and structural deficiencies before residents can return. "How long do I have?" I asked. 72 hours. The estimate attached to the order exceeded $800,000. Claire spoke gently. "Owen's company can fund the repairs immediately if you sign a temporary control agreement." "And if I refuse?" Nolan closed his folder. "At the end of 72 hours, I will recommend permanent condemnation." Claire placed a pen beside the agreement. 3 days. That was how long they had given me to save 48 homes. I did not touch the pen Claire placed beside the control agreement. Instead, I looked at the repair estimate, $812,000. The number was designed to frighten me into speed. It included emergency electrical replacement, structural drying, fire door upgrades, standpipe reconstruction, engineering fees, and a 25% rapid mobilization surcharge, charged by one of Owen Pike's construction companies. In 32 years, Mercer Court had never produced that much profit at once. Claire watched my face. "We can solve this," she said. "Owen is willing to advance the funds." "At what interest?" "It is not a loan. Then what does he receive?" "A temporary ownership position while the repairs are completed." Owen had not attended the meeting, but his fingerprints covered every page. "How temporary?" Claire looked toward Nolan. Nolan closed his folder. "The city is only concerned with compliance." He had no intention of answering a financial question. Ben stood beside the maintenance bench, staring at the floor. Grant Ellis had already begun removing North Harbor's tools, performing urgency for an audience that no longer existed. I let the silence stretch, then I picked up the pen. Claire's shoulders relaxed. I did not sign the control agreement. I drew a line through the signature block and wrote, "Subject to independent legal review. Non-binding letter of intent only." Claire leaned over the paper. "What are you doing?" "Cooperating. That language defeats the purpose. It allows your contractors to prepare plans while my attorney reviews the terms. We do not have time for Laura Chen to manufacture objections." "Then you should have offered a fair agreement." Her mouth tightened. I lowered my voice and allowed exhaustion to enter it. "Claire, I cannot fight anymore." The anger left her face, not because she felt sympathy, because she heard victory. I rested one hand against the workbench, as though standing had become difficult. "The residents are gone," I continued. "The building is wet. Ben believes I am making everything worse. Maybe I have held on too long." Ben looked up. Claire moved closer. "You have not failed," she said. You carried this place longer than anyone could have. The sentence was almost kind enough to hurt. I will move out temporarily, I said. I will undergo the evaluation. You can coordinate the emergency work. Claire touched my shoulder. That is the right decision. I watched relief move through the room. Grant stopped packing. Nolan reopened his folder. Ben sat down heavily on a crate. They had all expected resistance. Surrender confused them for less than a minute, then made them careless. Claire revised the document herself. The new letter gave North Harbor permission to obtain estimates, supervise emergency stabilization, and access Mercer Court's mechanical systems. It did not transfer ownership, voting rights, or permanent control. She wanted more. I gave her enough. We signed 3 copies in front of a notary from Nolan's office. I made my handwriting smaller than usual and paused twice as if I had forgotten the date. Claire noticed, so did Nolan, neither concealed their satisfaction. By evening, I had been moved into a furnished apartment at Lakeshore Haven, a private senior care complex overlooking Lake Michigan. Claire described it to reporters as a voluntary rest placement. It was not a hospital, and I had not been legally confined. But staff controlled the front desk, visitors signed in, and every hallway camera reminded me that privacy had become a privilege. My apartment was on the 4th floor, the east side. The windows faced the lake, where cold September rain moved across the black water in long gray sheets. The living room smelled of lemon polish and furniture no one had chosen for themselves. Claire unpacked my clothes. You will be comfortable here, she said. For how long? Until Mercer Court is safe and if it is condemned. She folded one of my sweaters with unnecessary precision. Then we make a new plan. She spoke as though 48 households were pieces on a board she could relocate. Ben arrived carrying Daniel's framed photograph. He placed it on the bedside table without meeting my eyes. I thought you would want this. Thank you. He waited for more. I gave him nothing. Claire checked her phone. I have to meet Owen. Grant will begin the structural survey tonight. Will Ben be present? She glanced at him. Of course, Ben's expression told me that was news to him. After they left, I sat by the window and counted the patrol boats moving through the harbor. Claire had taught me that habit years ago, count what you can control. At 7, Laura called from a number I had memorized. I answered with the television playing loudly. How did the surrender go? She asked. Convincingly, did you sign anything dangerous? Only the version we discussed. Good, the state preservation notice remains active. North Harbor can work, but they cannot destroy or remove records. They will try, let them try under supervision. Laura had already filed an objection to the emergency guardianship petition. She had also requested an independent competency examination instead of the physician Claire selected. Do not perform confusion for the evaluator, she warned. I know the difference between strategy and perjury. I know you know, I enjoy hearing you say it. Before ending the call, she gave me one more piece of news. North Harbor had requested access to the original architectural plans, including Daniel's fire protection drawings. They are not in the building, I said. Where are they? Safe. Keep them that way. The next morning, Claire visited with flowers and a folder of medical forms. I deliberately confused Tuesday with Wednesday and asked twice whether Ben had repaired the laundry fan. By lunch, she stopped watching her words around me. That afternoon, she returned my old brass master key ring. A symbolic gesture. Most of the locks had been replaced, but she wanted me to feel respected. Among the useless keys was one she did not recognize, a narrow service key for the rear utility entrance. Daniel had installed that lock himself. At dusk, I left Lakeshore Haven through the dining room terrace, crossed the garden, and took a taxi 3 blocks away to avoid the front cameras. Mercer Court stood dark behind temporary fencing. My service key opened the rear door. Inside, industrial fans roared through the wet corridors. Plastic sheeting covered the lobby. Voices came from my old office. I moved behind the partition and saw Claire, Owen, and Grant gathered around the building plans. Owen tapped the east side of the 2nd floor. She cannot be allowed back here unsupervised, Grant said. She will not be, Claire replied. Owen lowered his voice. Make sure she sleeps in the east apartment Thursday night. No one asked why, and for the first time I understood that taking Mercer Court was not the end of their plan. They needed me inside it. I remained behind the plastic partition until Owen folded the building plans. What happens Thursday? Grant asked. Claire answered before Owen could. My aunt returns for a final walkthrough. She wants to say goodbye before the condemnation hearing. And the East apartment? It was Daniel's favorite unit, she said. She will insist on staying there. Owen tapped the plans again. The city's heritage restriction is tied to the original residential structure. If the East Wing suffers major structural loss, the Preservation Board can declare the building economically non-viable. Grant lowered his voice. You said this was a controlled pressure event, it is. Owen replied. No one else will be inside. My body went still. They were not merely preparing to take Mercer Court. They were preparing to damage it badly enough that no court, tenant, or preservation commission could force them to maintain it. And they expected me to be sleeping inside. Claire gathered the papers. She will be monitored. If anything happens, staff will remove her. Owen laughed softly. Assuming she wakes up, Claire did not answer. That silence was more frightening than agreement. I backed away from the partition one slow step at a time. Industrial fans covered the sound of my movement. At the rear entrance, I locked the door behind me and walked 3 blocks before calling a taxi. I did not return directly to Lakeshore Haven. I went to the 24-hour diner where Daniel and I had eaten after closing on Mercer Court. Laura met me in a corner booth at 11:30, wearing a raincoat over her pajamas and an expression that suggested I had already disappointed her. You entered a condemned building alone, she said. I entered property I own, through a hidden door after dark, through a service entrance. Those are the words people use immediately before explaining an injury. I told her what I had heard. She stopped criticizing me. Did you record it? No, did anyone see you? I do not think so. Then we have information, not evidence, I know. The waitress brought coffee. Laura pushed hers aside untouched. What is special about the East Wing? Daniel designed most of it himself. 4 apartments, a small reading room, and the original courtyard wall. Why would damaging one section affect the entire project? I thought about Owen's words. The heritage restriction. What restriction? There was an agreement when we restored the building. Daniel handled it. You signed it? I signed dozens of documents. Laura gave me a look. Evelyn, it was 30 years ago. Daniel negotiated with the city and the Preservation Society. I dealt with the fire systems and financing. Where are the original records? Not at Mercer Court. Daniel had never trusted basements, even dry ones. He kept deeds, surveys, and major contracts in a bank-safe deposit box under both our names. At 8 the next morning, Laura and I entered the bank together. The box contained our marriage certificate, Daniel's military papers, the original deed to Mercer Court, and a stack of documents wrapped in blue cloth tape. Near the bottom was a folder marked, Mercer Court Preservation Covenant. Permanent, Laura read, while I watched the rain move against the bank's narrow windows. The covenant had been signed by Daniel, me, the city, and a neighborhood preservation trust. In exchange for tax credits and restoration grants, we agreed that Mercer Court would remain primarily residential, and that no owner could demolish or convert it for luxury commercial use. The restriction ran with the land. It would bind every future buyer. That should stop Owen, I said. Laura continued reading. Not entirely. A hardship clause allowed demolition if a licensed engineer and the Preservation Board determined that repair costs exceeded a defined percentage of the building's value. How much damage? I asked. 40%. The repair estimate Claire had placed before me was already approaching that threshold. A major fire in the East Wing could push Mercer Court over it. Laura turned another page. There is also a founder provision. Daniel had insisted on it. As long as either original owner remained alive and legally competent, the hardship clause could not be invoked without that owner's written consent. The meaning struck both of us at once. They need me declared incompetent, I said, or dead. Claire's guardianship petition was not only about control of my finances. It was the key that could release Mercer Court from Daniel's covenant. The false inspection report, the pressure losses, the flood, the condemnation deadline, each event increased the repair estimate. The guardianship would remove my power to object. The planned damage to the East Wing would trigger the hardship clause. Then Owen could tear the building down legally, Laura photographed every page and arranged for a certified copy to remain with the bank. The original stayed in the box. "We need to know who benefits from the redevelopment," she said. "Oh, and that is obvious. I mean, Claire, she benefits politically. Political benefit does not explain attempted arson." We spent the afternoon in the County Register of Deeds, the state corporate database, campaign finance records, zoning applications, and public meeting disclosures. No secret passwords, no private servers, only documents anyone could request if they knew which names to compare. The proposed buyer was Lakefront Community Renewal LLC, presented in Claire's public statements as a non-profit-minded housing partnership. Its registered agent was an attorney who represented Owen Pike. The LLC was owned by 3 other companies. One belonged to Owen, one belonged to an investment fund based in Madison. The third was called Civic Heritage Consulting. Its mailing address was a private mailbox 2 blocks from City Hall. Laura searched old campaign reports. Civic Heritage Consulting had received payments from Claire's election committee for community research. The company's organizer was Claire's campaign treasurer, Susan Bell. That still did not prove Claire owned it. Then I found a mortgage filing attached to the LLC's development application. Civic Heritage had pledged its ownership share as security for a private loan. The guarantor's full legal name appeared on the final page. Claire Joanne Walsh, my niece, had not been helping Owen redevelop Mercer Court. She was his hidden business partner. If the project went forward, Claire would receive 32% of the profits. Laura stared at the document. This was filed 6 months before the first pressure loss. I looked at Claire's signature beneath the guarantee. The fires had not created an opportunity. They had been part of the project from the beginning. Laura made 3 certified copies of the mortgage filing before we left the records office. One went into her case file, one went to a secure document service. The third stayed with me, folded inside my handbag. "Do not confront Claire," she said. "I was not planning to. You said that before the residents' meeting. I am capable of learning." She stopped beneath the courthouse archway. "Then learn this carefully. A hidden financial interest gives us motive. It does not prove she ordered sabotage, falsified inspections, or intended to harm you. What would? A witness, communications, a payment trail, or another act committed while someone lawful is watching. The last possibility stayed with me. A fire investigator cannot rebuild the first flame. You work backward through damage, timing, and opportunity. But when someone believes a method has already fooled you, they often use it again." Claire had repeated hers 4 times. That afternoon, Laura arranged a private meeting with Anita Morales and Raymond Cole at a neighborhood legal clinic. Anita reviewed the covenant, Claire's loan guarantee, the access logs, Nolan's altered photograph, and Raymond's analysis of the pressure chart. She built a timeline on a yellow pad. The first pressure loss came 2 days after Claire's company entered the development partnership. The second followed Owen's preliminary demolition study. The third occurred after Claire met privately with Nolan. The fourth came the night before the laundry room fire. Then came the standpipe rupture, evacuation, and 72-hour condemnation order. "This is enough to expand the state inquiry," Anita said. "It is not enough to accuse an elected official publicly. Can you seize the pump records? Not without consent, a warrant, or evidence they are being destroyed. North Harbor controls the room and has received a preservation notice. We need to document any violation." Raymond opened Daniel's original fire protection drawings across the table. Daniel had designed 2 ways to maintain pressure: the main electric pump and an older diesel backup. North Harbor's reports mentioned only the electric unit. They did not disclose the backup. Raymond said, "Could it still run?" Anita asked. If Ben maintained it, he did. Raymond traced a line to a monitoring port behind the east stairwell. "We can install an independent sensor here without entering the locked pump room. We need the owner's permission, you have it, and state authorization." Anita said, "I will request a hazard monitoring order." Laura leaned forward. "Would the readings be admissible if the state installs, calibrates, and logs the device?" For the first time since the fire, we had more than a defense. We would preserve what we had, monitor what came next, and force everyone involved to choose between retreating and exposing themselves. Laura would challenge the guardianship petition and demand sworn conflict of interest disclosures before any sale. Anita would compare Nolan's files with city archives. Raymond would certify the pressure data. Lena would document every relocation promise Claire made to the tenants. My role was simpler and harder. I had to remain defeated. That evening, I called Claire from Lakeshore Haven. "I want to cooperate," I said. "No more lawyers at every conversation. Laura is frightening you." Perhaps the word pleased her. I told her I would consider a sale if the tenants received relocation assistance and if I could visit Mercer Court one final time. "I think closure would be healthy," she said. "Daniel and I spent our first night there in apartment 2E. I want to sleep there once more before I sign anything." "The East apartment, exactly where Owen wanted me." Claire paused. "The building may not be safe. You said North Harbor was stabilizing it." "They are. Then one night should not be dangerous." She sighed carefully. "I will ask Nolan." I thanked her as though she were granting mercy. The trap was not ready. We still did not know what Claire intended to do in the East Wing or how she planned to isolate me. But she had heard the invitation she wanted. The next morning, Anita received approval for limited hazard monitoring. Raymond and a state technician entered Mercer Court under the active safety review. Using Daniel's drawings, they found the old port behind a painted access panel and installed a calibrated sensor that transmitted pressure readings directly to the state system. Raymond called after testing it. "The backup pump works," he said. "Someone has maintained it." "Ben, then your nephew may be weak, but he has not neglected everything." I wanted that distinction to matter. Laura's investigator also confirmed that Nolan's assistant had not taken the disputed photograph. It came from Nolan's personal device. Its metadata showed it was created 3 days before the fire and edited the morning after. The first layer of their story was cracking. Still, every piece stopped short of Claire. Nolan could claim error. Grant could blame contractors. Owen could say the LLC structure was legal. Ben could insist someone copied his badge. Claire had built herself a wall out of other people. At 4 that afternoon, Lena called from the rehabilitation center. 2 residents were offered cash to sign statements saying, "You ignored electrical complaints," she said. The envelopes came from a nonprofit connected to Claire. "Keep them. Do not confront anyone. You sound different." I stopped trying to make them admit what they are doing. "What are you doing now?" "Giving them room to make the next mistake." At 9:16 that night, my phone vibrated. Malik had sent a photograph. It showed a compact metal device with a timer, 2 insulated leads, and a North Harbor inventory sticker. Behind it, I recognized the damaged laundry room wall. His message contained 6 words. "They hid this inside the east wall." I called immediately. The phone rang once, then went dead. I stared at the photograph until the timer blurred beneath my eyes. Malik had been afraid of losing his job. Now I wondered whether fear had arrived at his door, wearing a North Harbor jacket. By morning he had vanished from Mercer Court, from his apartment, and from every number we had for him. Laura found Malik before Claire did. He had not disappeared willingly. A North Harbor supervisor had followed him home, shown him photographs of his younger sister leaving nursing school, and warned that accidents happened to people who made false accusations against powerful employers. Malik packed a backpack and spent the night in the bus station. Laura's investigator located him after his sister reported him missing. By noon, they had moved both of them to a hotel outside Milwaukee under names Claire did not know. When Laura told me, relief came first, then shame. I had asked a frightened 25-year-old to stand near a fire I should have known would spread toward him. "He wants to withdraw," Laura said. "Let him. We need his testimony. We need him alive and able to look his sister in the eye." Laura studied me. "You are willing to lose the case?" "No, I am willing to build one that does not rest on a young man being braver than everyone who failed him." Malik had already given us the photograph of the timer device. That image was not enough to prove where it had been found, but it told Raymond what to look for. The state hazard order allowed Anita's team to inspect the East Wing fire system without notifying North Harbor of every technical step. They could not search walls for evidence of a crime without broader authority, but they could verify whether concealed equipment interfered with fire protection. Raymond proposed something less dramatic and more useful. He would replace the ordinary access lock on the pressure monitoring panel with a state evidence seal and a serialized cylinder. Anyone opening it would leave a record. The independent sensor would continue sending data to the state archive. A second device would measure electrical current on the backup pump. If Claire's people touched the system again, they would not know they were creating evidence in two places. Laura handled the legal side. She filed a motion asking the guardianship court to delay any transfer of Mercer Court until Claire disclosed all financial interests connected to the proposed buyer. She attached the preservation covenant, but held back Claire's personal guarantee. "We do not show every card before she commits to her story," Laura said. The court refused to cancel the temporary hearing. It did, however, order that no permanent sale could occur without public review because city redevelopment funds were involved. Claire could have retreated then. Instead, she announced a televised special hearing before the Milwaukee Committee on Urban Renewal. She framed it as transparency. The notice described Mercer Court as an urgent humanitarian and public safety crisis. Claire would present a relocation plan. Owen would offer emergency financing, and I would be invited to address the community before relinquishing control. It was the ceremony she wanted, a public rescue, a defeated old woman, a signature captured from 3 camera angles. I called Claire and thanked her. "You deserve to be heard," she said. "I do not have much left to say. You can speak about Daniel. People should understand what the building meant to both of you." Past tense, Claire was already delivering Mercer Court's eulogy. I asked whether the hearing could include a formal declaration that residents would receive first priority in Owen's new development. "That can be arranged," and a statement that no committee member has a private financial interest in the buyer. Her answer came half a second late. "Standard ethics disclosures already cover that. I would feel better seeing it in writing." Laura suggested this. "I am trying to leave things orderly." That appealed to the version of me Claire wanted to believe in. Tired, sentimental, concerned with appearances rather than consequences. "I will have counsel prepare something," she said. After the call, Laura smiled for the first time in days. "She will sign?" "She thinks the statement protects her. If we draft it properly, it will destroy her defense that she misunderstood the transaction." The document would require Claire to declare under oath that neither she nor any entity she controlled held a direct or indirect financial interest in Lakefront Community Renewal LLC. The wording mattered. So did the timing. She had to sign after entering the hearing record, but before I refused the sale. Lena worked on the residents. From 3 temporary shelters, she collected written accounts of what Claire's office had promised. Temporary relocation, unchanged rents, guaranteed return, no luxury conversion. Each statement was dated and witnessed. Most residents still believed Claire was helping them. I told Lena not to change their minds. Why let her keep lying? She asked, "Because promises made privately can be denied. Promises made before cameras become part of the trap." Ben remained the piece I could not place. He attended North Harbor meetings, coordinated contractor access, and answered Claire's calls. Yet the backup fire pump had been maintained perfectly. Someone had replaced its fuel, tested its battery, and kept handwritten service notes outside North Harbor's electronic system. Only Ben knew Daniel's schedule for that equipment. He was protecting the building while helping Claire take it from me. I did not know whether guilt or loyalty would win when it mattered. 2 days before the hearing, Claire visited Lakeshore Haven with Susan Bell, her campaign treasurer. Susan carried a folder containing the preliminary sale documents and my planned farewell statement. I pretended to read slowly. Claire watched my eyes instead of the pages. "The original pressure chart," she said casually. "Laura still has it." I let confusion cross my face. "What chart?" "The one you claimed showed the pump failure." I looked toward the window. "Oh, that strip of paper. Yes, I may have left it in my office." Claire and Susan exchanged a glance. "The office was flooded," Claire said. "Then I suppose it is gone." I watched her work to hide the relief. That evening, North Harbor submitted notice that water damage had destroyed several boxes of old maintenance records. Included on the list was the archive containing the mechanical pressure charts. They had taken the bait. The original remained in Laura's secure evidence storage, documented, photographed, and examined by Raymond. The next morning, Anita called. The independent monitoring equipment was active. The evidence panel had been sealed. State investigators would watch the pressure feed remotely, during the hearing, and during my planned return to apartment 2E. "Do not enter the building unless we clear it," she said. "I understand, I mean it, Evelyn, so does everyone." At dusk, Claire arrived at Mercer Court for a private walkthrough. Anita's technician observed from an unmarked city vehicle across the street. Claire entered the basement with Grant. She walked directly to the concealed monitoring panel behind the east stairwell. The new serialized lock caught the light. Claire stopped. For several seconds she did not move. Then she leaned close enough to read the state evidence number, and slowly turned toward Grant, with a look that said she finally understood someone had been watching. Claire did not touch the serialized lock. That was the first sign she understood its importance. An innocent person might have asked what it was. A careless person might have pulled at it. Claire simply stared, reading the state evidence number twice before turning toward Grant. The technician watching from across the street could not hear their conversation, but he saw Grant shake his head. Claire pointed toward the ceiling, then toward the rear entrance. They left the basement less than 2 minutes later. At 8:07 the next morning, she arrived at Lakeshore Haven without calling. I was eating oatmeal in the dining room when she sat across from me. She did not bring flowers, legal forms, or one of the soft cardigans she had begun buying to make me look more fragile. She brought a photograph. It showed the monitoring panel, beneath the easty stairwell, and the new state lock. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I adjusted my hearing aid. "Some kind of padlock. It was installed inside Mercer Court." Then asked Ben. I did, and he says he knows nothing about it. Her eyes never left mine. Claire had changed since the first fire. The warmth she once wore, naturally now, appeared only when she remembered to put it on. This morning she made no effort. "Someone gave state investigators access to the building," she said. "The state has been inspecting the building, not that section." I spooned oatmeal slowly. "You told me the city controlled everything now. The city did not authorize this. Then perhaps Nolan should speak to the state." "This is not about Nolan." She slid the photograph closer. The panel was concealed behind paint and plaster. Someone showed them where to find it. Daniel's drawings had done that. But Claire did not know Laura possessed them. I looked at the photograph again, then frowned as though struggling to remember. There used to be a valve box near that stairwell. Claire leaned forward. "What valve box?" "For the old diesel pump, Daniel put access panels in strange places. When did you tell anyone about it?" "I do not know." Her fingers stopped moving. "You do not know." "I spoke to several people after the pipe burst." "Who?" I let my eyes drift toward the lake. "Raymond, or perhaps the other man." "What other man?" "The one with the badge. That was the mistake. Anita Morales wore a state badge. Raymond did not." Claire knew exactly who had entered Mercer Court during the official inspection. Her expression sharpened. "What badge?" I lowered my spoon. "The fire inspector, Nolan." "No, the woman, Anita Morales, if that is her name." Claire sat back. For one dangerous second, I saw the entire plan shifting behind her eyes. She was no longer certain I had surrendered. My confusion sounded too convenient. The concealed panel had been found too precisely. The pressure chart she believed destroyed might not be gone. She reached across the table and touched my wrist. "Aunt Evelyn, are you still working with Laura?" "Laura is my attorney. You said you did not want lawyers controlling every conversation." "I also said I wanted my tenants protected." Her thumb pressed lightly against my pulse. "Did you authorize surveillance inside Mercer Court?" The dining room continued around us. Silverware touched plates. A television played morning weather. Two residents near the window argued about whether rain would ruin the garden club outing. Claire had chosen a public room because she expected me to retreat from conflict. Instead, I studied her the way I once studied witnesses. People think interrogation is about asking difficult questions. Usually, it is about identifying which truth a person fears most and allowing them to reveal it while trying to avoid it. Claire had not asked whether the state installed a safety monitor. She had called it surveillance. Only someone with something to hide would choose that word. I let confusion leave my face. "Why would a pressure sensor frighten you?" Her hand withdrew. "It does not. You came here before breakfast with a photograph of a lock hidden in a basement. Because someone entered a condemned building without informing management. Like North Harbor did before the first fire? Color rose beneath her makeup. You are doing it again. Doing what? Creating accusations from ordinary events. A concealed state monitor is ordinary. Her voice dropped. I knew this sudden surrender was an act. I looked around the dining room. You should lower your voice. People may think you are upsetting a confused old woman. That stopped her. I had used her own story against her, and she knew it. The anger disappeared behind a careful smile. I am worried about you. No, Claire. You are worried about what I remember. She stood. The hearing is still scheduled. I hope Laura has explained what happens if you embarrass yourself on live television. She has explained many things. Claire gathered the photograph. At the doorway, she turned. You should not return to Mercer Court before the hearing. I thought you wanted me to spend Thursday night in apartment 2E. Her entire body went still. The silence lasted only a second, but it was enough. I never said that. No? You must have misunderstood perhaps. She left without touching me again. I called Laura from my room. She knows the lock was found, I said. We expected that. She suspects I led Anita to it. That was always possible. I mentioned the East apartment. Laura was silent. That was not part of the plan. I wanted to see her reaction and... She lied immediately. That may satisfy you. It does not help us in court. She was right. My need to confirm what I already believed had nearly told Claire exactly how much I knew. Old investigators sometimes become dangerous when experience turns into pride. We trust our instincts because they have saved us before. Then we step too close to the flame simply to prove we can identify its heat. Laura instructed Anita to move Malik and his sister again. If Claire believed the state had inside information, Malik was the most obvious source. I called him through Laura's secure line. I am sorry, I said. For what? For making you visible. You did not threaten my sister, no. But I underestimated the people who would. Malik remained quiet. I took another picture before I left, he said. The device had 2 wires running east. Where? Toward apartment 2E. That confirmed the danger, but before he could explain more, Laura ended the call. Keeping him connected too long created another risk. At Mercer Court, Claire ordered North Harbor to replace every remaining service lock. My hidden rear entrance was discovered by noon. The route I had used was gone. That evening, Ben came to Lakeshore Haven. He looked worse than he had after the fire. His shirt was wrinkled, and a purple bruise darkened the skin near his jaw. Who hit you? I asked. No one, Ben. He sat in the chair beside Daniel's photograph. I need to tell you something about the badge. I waited. He pressed both hands between his knees. I gave it to Claire. When? The night before the laundry room fire. Why? She said Nolan needed access for an emergency inspection. Did she return it? The next morning, did she tell you what they did inside? No, his eyes filled, but he did not look away. I swear I did not know about the pressure. I did not know there would be a fire. I believed that part. What did you know? Ben swallowed. I knew she was trying to force you out. Why did you help her? He looked toward the closed door. Then he whispered, because she said if I refused, my daughter would lose the treatment keeping her alive. Ben's daughter was 13 years old. Her name was Sophie, and she had been born with a neuromuscular disorder that gradually weakened the muscles controlling her arms, legs, and breathing. For 2 years, Claire had used a political connection to secure Sophie a place in an experimental rehabilitation program at St. Agnes Children's Center. The treatment was not a cure. It was the reason she could still walk without assistance. When Claire found out the program might lose funding, she stepped in, Ben said. She arranged a private grant. She told me Owen's foundation was paying for it, and later? She said the grant depended on the redevelopment project moving forward. I tried to separate the brother I had raised from the man who had signed a statement against me. What exactly did she ask you to do? At first, small things. Give North Harbor access, delay maintenance reports, tell the residents you were forgetting appointments. His voice broke. Then she asked for my badge, and you gave it to her. I thought they were creating violations. I thought they wanted photographs bad enough to justify professional management. I never thought they would set a fire. You knew they were building a false case against me. Yes, why did you maintain the diesel backup pump? Daniel made me promise I would test it every month. Claire told me to stop documenting it because Owen wanted the system to look obsolete. I could not do that. One promise kept, a dozen others broken. Will you testify? I asked. Ben closed his eyes. If I do, Sophie loses the program. Laura may be able to protect the funding. May? No one honest can promise more. Claire had chosen her leverage well. She had placed his child on one side of a scale and my building on the other. I need time, he said. We no longer have much. My phone rang before he left. Laura did not greet me. The committee hearing has been moved to tomorrow morning. It was scheduled for Friday. Claire filed an emergency motion after receiving a new engineering report. She says every additional day creates unacceptable danger to displaced residents. Who wrote it? A firm owned by one of Owen's partners. The shortened deadline damaged nearly every part of our plan. Laura had expected another day to authenticate the LLC records and prepare the ethics declaration. Anita needed time to secure broader judicial authority. Raymond had not completed his comparison of the current pressure readings with the original charts. Most importantly, we had planned to let Claire believe she controlled Thursday night. Now the hearing would begin before Claire expected me to return to apartment 2E. Can you delay it? I can object. The committee chair has already approved the emergency calendar. Claire chairs the committee. Her vice chair approved it, while she recused herself for 11 minutes. A legal gesture designed for cameras. Ben heard enough to understand. She knows, he said. She suspects. He reached for the door. Where are you going? To speak to Claire. No, she is using your daughter as collateral. She is my sister. You gave her your badge because you believed you could reason with her before. He flinched and left without promising anything. At noon, Laura called again. Malik had changed his mind. He refused to give a sworn statement and wanted to leave Wisconsin with his sister. Do not pressure him, I said. His photograph is much weaker without testimony. Then we use it as a lead. Not proof, Evelyn. Our case is narrowing. Our easy case is narrowing. Laura was quiet. What do you suggest? We stop trying to prove every past act before the hearing. We make Claire commit to the future one. The ethics declaration would still be presented. The covenant would still enter the public record. Claire believed the mechanical chart had been destroyed. She believed Ben would remain silent and Malik had disappeared. If she thought the pressure monitor had exposed too much, she might change methods. That uncertainty frightened me more than the original plan. Anita called at 2:40. The independent pressure feed stopped transmitting. When, 8 minutes ago, power loss? The battery backup also went offline. Someone opened the panel. The serialized lock has not reported a breach. Then they cut the signal somewhere else. Anita had a technician nearby, but Nolan had issued new restrictions around Mercer Court. State access was being challenged while the city reviewed the monitoring order. Raymond studied Daniel's drawings and identified a communications junction beneath the rear courtyard. It could be reached without opening the monitored panel. North Harbor knows the plans now, he said. They may have found the transmission line. Can they alter the pressure without the sensor recording it? If they severed the feed first, yes. Anita ordered an emergency inspection. Nolan denied immediate entry, claiming contractors were conducting hazardous mold removal. Claire called 10 minutes later. Her tone was warm again. The hearing is tomorrow. Once you sign, repairs can begin immediately. You moved it without telling me. I was trying to reduce your stress. Will the ethics statement be ready? A pause. Yes, in my farewell. You will have all the time you need. She wanted me in front of the cameras before I learned what they were doing inside Mercer Court. Has the East Wing been stabilized? I asked. It is completely secure. Another lie. After the call, I asked Lakeshore Haven to bring my dark blue suit from storage. I polished Daniel's old cufflinks and reviewed my statement with Laura. At 6, Lena called from the rehabilitation center. 3 residents went back to Mercer Court, she said. My chair scraped the floor. Why? North Harbor told them they could collect medications and family documents before the hearing. Mrs. Novick went for her late husband's papers. Mr. Bell took his grandson. Are they still inside? I think so. I called Anita. Before she answered, my second line lit up with an automated alert from the independent safety system. The signal had returned for less than 3 seconds. Long enough to transmit one reading, smoke detected in the Mercer Court basement, and the fire suppression pressure was falling. I told Anita there were residents inside Mercer Court before she finished saying hello. She alerted the fire department while I called Lena back. "Get me Mrs. Novak's number. She left her phone at the center, Mr. Bell." "He is not answering." I was already moving toward the elevator. A Lakeshore Haven nurse stepped into my path. "Mrs. Mercer, you cannot leave without signing out, then bring me the form." Claire had spent weeks portraying me as an unstable woman who ignored safety. I would not help her by charging into a smoke-filled building. I had trained too many firefighters to respect command structures. But I would be there when they brought my people out. The taxi had barely stopped before I opened the door. 2 engines blocked the street outside Mercer Court. Smoke pressed against the basement windows, darker than it had been during the laundry room fire. Firefighters pulled hose through the rear courtyard, while police moved reporters behind a barricade. The pressure problem had forced crews to connect directly to a hydrant. Someone had again made Mercer Court fight a fire without its own defenses. I found Anita beside the command vehicle. 3 residents entered, I said, 1 child. They located 2 adults on the 2nd floor. Crews are still searching. Which adults? I do not know yet. Claire arrived in a Black City vehicle before Anita could answer. She stepped into the rain wearing a white blouse beneath her coat, as if she had dressed to be visible beneath television lights. Susan Bell followed with an umbrella. Owen remained inside the car. Claire saw me and hurried forward. "You should not be here. Who authorized residents to enter?" "No one from my office. North Harbor told them they could collect belongings." "That is impossible." Anita turned toward her. "We will need the names of every contractor with access today." Claire's expression remained composed. "Of course, whatever you need." A firefighter emerged carrying Mrs. Novak. She was conscious, coughing beneath an oxygen mask. Claire reached her before I did. Cameras recorded the older woman kneeling in the rain, holding the older woman's hand and promising that everything would be all right. I looked past them toward the entrance. Mr. Bell appeared next, supported by 2 firefighters. His grandson was not with him. The world narrowed. "Where is the child?" I asked. Mr. Bell pulled off his mask. "He ran back for the box." "What box?" "His grandmother's letters." The battalion chief heard him and transmitted the information. "Apartment 3C, rear bedroom." I knew every wall between the stairwell and that room. I knew where smoke would collect and where the old corridor narrowed beside the plumbing chase. Knowing did nothing while I stood outside. 3 minutes later, a firefighter appeared at a 3rd-floor window with the boy in his arms. Another crew guided them toward the stairs. The child came through the front entrance, crying but uninjured. Only then did my knees weaken. Claire moved toward him as the cameras shifted. She wrapped him in her coat. It was a perfect image. The young public servant protecting a child from the ruins created by her elderly aunt. I hated myself for noticing the politics before the relief. The fire was controlled within 40 minutes. The visible damage remained mostly in a basement storage room, though smoke had traveled through the east stairwell. The official cause could not be determined that night. Raymond spoke quietly beside the command vehicle. The backup pump was switched to manual and disabled at the fuel cutoff. Could the fire do that? No. Was the state sensor damaged? The transmission cable was cut beneath the courtyard. The sensor continued logging internally, but we cannot retrieve the data until Anita gets access. Nolan Briggs arrived after the fire was extinguished. He walked past Anita and issued a statement to reporters describing the incident as another catastrophic failure of obsolete infrastructure. He had not entered the basement. He had not examined the pump. He already knew the conclusion. Claire stood beside him with soot deliberately left on the sleeve of her blouse. "This cannot continue," she told the cameras. "Tomorrow's hearing is no longer merely about property. It is about whether public officials have the courage to prevent the next tragedy." A reporter pointed toward me. "Mrs. Mercer, do you accept responsibility for allowing the building to deteriorate?" Claire turned with an expression of protective concern. "My aunt has been through enough tonight." I can answer. Every microphone shifted. I looked at the tenants behind the barricade. Then at the dark windows Daniel and I had restored one by one. I accept responsibility for finding the truth before anyone returns inside. Claire's smile did not move. That is why tomorrow matters, she said. We will finally give these families a safe future. By morning, the photograph of Claire holding Mr. Bell's grandson appeared on every local news site. The headline called her the savior of Mercer Court. No article mentioned that her management company had admitted the residents. At 8:30, a Lakeshore Haven attendant helped me into a wheelchair. I could walk. The chair was Laura's idea. Claire needs to believe the cameras have already decided who you are, she said. I wore the dark blue suit Daniel had always liked. His cufflinks rested at my wrists. The certified covenant was hidden in Laura's briefcase. The original pressure chart remained in secured evidence storage. Anita and Raymond were positioned outside the hearing chamber, waiting for judicial authorization to enter Mercer Court and retrieve the internal sensor data. Ben had not answered his phone since leaving my apartment. Malik still refused to appear. Our plan was incomplete. We went forward anyway. The Milwaukee City Hall hearing chamber was full before I arrived. Displaced tenants occupied the rear rows. Reporters lined the walls. Owen sat with a team of attorneys beneath a presentation screen displaying architectural images of glass balconies, medical suites, and landscaped courtyards. They had renamed the project Harbor Legacy Residences. Mercer Court had already disappeared from their drawings. Claire entered to applause. She paused beside my wheelchair and rested a hand on my shoulder. To the room, it looked affectionate, her fingers pressed into the fabric. This can still end with dignity, she whispered. It will. She took her seat beneath the city seal and opened the hearing. For 40 minutes, Claire controlled every voice. Nolan described repeated system failures. Owen promised relocation payments and priority apartments. Susan presented letters from residents who supposedly supported the sale. Claire spoke of compassion, difficult choices, and the danger of allowing memory to stand in the way of progress. Then she invited me forward. Laura wheeled me to the central table. Claire descended from the committee platform carrying 2 documents. The first was the sworn ethics declaration I had requested. The second was the permanent transfer of Mercer Court. She signed the declaration before the cameras, placed it on top of the transfer agreement, and slid both pages toward my trembling hand. Your turn, Aunt Evelyn, she said. Claire placed the fountain pen between my fingers. The chamber waited. Cameras leaned toward me from the aisle. Owen Pike sat behind his attorneys. Nolan Briggs watched from the witness table, one hand resting on the report he had used to condemn my building. I looked down at the transfer agreement, then at Claire's signature on the ethics declaration. She had sworn, under penalty of perjury, that she held no direct or indirect financial interest in Lakefront Community Renewal LLC, Owen's project, or any entity that would profit from Mercer Court's demolition. The act could not be withdrawn. I let the pen shake against the paper. Claire bent close enough that only I could hear her. Just write your name. I opened my fingers. The pen rolled across the table and stopped against the red valve tag I had taken from my handbag. Claire's expression changed. I placed both hands on the wheelchair arms and stood. A murmur passed through the chamber. Laura moved the chair aside. I straightened my jacket, adjusted Daniel's cufflinks, and faced the committee without the weakness Claire had spent weeks teaching the city to see. I will not sign the transfer, I said. No one moved. Claire recovered first. This is precisely the instability we were concerned about. No. This is why you moved the hearing forward before the evidence could reach the public record. She turned toward the committee. My aunt is confused. Her attorney has manipulated her into disrupting an emergency proceeding. Laura rose. For the record, my client has been examined by an independent geriatric psychiatrist selected through the court. She has no cognitive impairment affecting her legal capacity. She handed the clerk a sealed report. Claire stared at it. You had no authority to arrange that without notifying the proposed guardian. I do not need a proposed guardian's permission to represent a competent client. Owen whispered to one of his attorneys. The attorney began gathering documents. I placed the certified preservation covenant on the table. 30 years ago, my husband and I accepted public restoration funds in exchange for keeping Mercer Court residential and affordable. That covenant remains attached to the land, It cannot be removed through a sale. Owen stood. The hardship clause permits redevelopment when rehabilitation is economically impossible. It does, but while an original owner remains alive and competent, that clause requires my written approval. I looked at Claire. That is why you needed the court, to give you control of me, before Owen took control of the building. Claire's face remained composed, but she stopped blinking. This is fantasy. I have no relationship with Mr. Pike beyond my official duties. Laura handed another document to the clerk. This certified mortgage filing was submitted by Civic Heritage Consulting. It guarantees part of Lakefront Community Renewal's development loan. The clerk activated the chamber display. Claire's full legal name appeared beneath the guarantee. A sound moved through the audience, softer than a gasp and heavier than conversation. I pointed to the declaration Claire had just signed. You swore you had no financial interest. Claire looked toward Susan Bell. Susan's chair was empty. She used my name, Claire said. Campaign officers file documents constantly. I did not review every page. Owen's attorney rose. My client had no knowledge of any misrepresentation by Alderwoman Walsh. You expect us to believe Claire guaranteed a multi-million-dollar loan without your knowledge? I asked. The attorney objected, though no judge sat in the room. Claire reached for the microphone. This hearing concerns a dangerous building, not political paperwork. 2 fires, a ruptured standpipe, and repeated system failures prove Mercer Court cannot remain occupied. I removed the original pressure chart from a rigid evidence sleeve. For the first time, fear crossed her face without permission. That record was destroyed, she said. The microphone carried her words throughout the chamber. I waited. Claire realized what she had admitted. The maintenance archive was reported destroyed by water. This chart was never in the archive. Raymond Cole stepped forward from the rear row. The clerk accepted his certification and displayed an enlarged image of the ink line. He explained the 19-second pressure decline, the 6 minutes and 48 seconds of restricted flow, and the staged recovery before the laundry room sprinklers activated. This pattern is inconsistent with mechanical failure, he said. The system was manually restricted. Nolan rose. That conclusion is speculative. Raymond turned toward him. Then explain why your inspection photograph predates the fire by 3 days. The image appeared beside its metadata. Nolan's device identification was listed beneath it. I conducted a preliminary inspection. You testified that the image was taken during the emergency. I misspoke. You edited it the following morning. Nolan closed his folder. Grant Ellis was not in the chamber. Neither was Susan. Claire saw the absences and raised her voice. Even if a contractor altered a valve, that does not implicate me. North Harbor managed dozens of workers. My brother's access badge opened the pump room before the first fire. If you want someone to blame, ask Ben. There it was, the first sacrifice. Claire had called everything she did family protection. The moment the structure weakened, she placed her brother beneath it. A side door opened. Anita Morales entered with 2 state investigators and a representative from the district attorney's office. They carried evidence cases, warrants, and the quiet authority of people who had already persuaded a judge. Claire stepped back. This is a legislative hearing. You cannot stage an arrest for television. No one is arresting you at this moment, Anita said. We are executing a search warrant at Mercer Court and preserving evidence related to suspected interference with a fire suppression system. The display changed. A live pressure graph appeared from the independent state sensor. The signal had returned when investigators restored the cut transmission line. For several seconds, the reading held steady. Then the line began to fall. Raymond moved toward the screen. Someone is closing the bypass. Anita touched her radio. Entry team, proceed. A second window opened on the display. A lawful body camera feed from the basement stairwell. Investigators descended past Daniel's painted pipes toward the pump room. The valve wheel was moving. A gloved hand appeared behind it. Someone inside Mercer Court was disabling the fire system while Claire sat beneath oath at City Hall. When an investigator ordered the person to step into view, I recognized the jacket before I saw the face. It belonged to North Harbor. The investigator pulled the man away from the valve and turned him toward the body camera. Grant Ellis. Even through the grainy feed, I recognized the narrow face, the blue North Harbor jacket, and the expression of a man who had never imagined the room could testify against him. A second investigator opened Grant's tool case. Inside were wire cutters, a replacement city seal, and the same compact timer Malik had photographed behind the east wall. The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Committee members spoke over one another. Owen's attorneys closed around him, whispering urgently. Nolan Briggs moved toward the side exit. Anita Morales raised one hand. Inspector Briggs, remain available. The warrant includes your municipal inspection files and electronic devices. Nolan stopped. Claire struck the gavel until the microphone squealed. This hearing is suspended. None of this has been authenticated. The state censor was installed under a lawful safety order, Anita said. The search was authorized by a circuit judge. Mr. Ellis was observed interfering with an active fire protection system. Claire turned toward Owen. Tell them your employee acted without instructions. Owen stared at her. Grant works for North Harbor. North Harbor works for you. My company holds a minority investment. Your office selected the manager. The alliance cracked in public. Claire leaned toward him. Do not lie now. Owen's face changed. You brought me Mercer Court. The sentence silenced the room more effectively than the gavel. Claire's eyes hardened. You approached the city. You approached me 18 months ago with the covenant, the founder clause, and a plan to trigger the hardship provision. His senior attorney grabbed his sleeve. Stop speaking. Owen sat down, but the damage had already entered the record. Claire looked toward the cameras as though she could still rearrange what they had heard. He is protecting himself by inventing a conversation. The rear doors opened. Ben walked into the chamber. The bruise along his jaw had darkened. He carried a black laptop beneath one arm and held his phone in the other hand. Laura rose and met him halfway down the aisle. Claire stared at her brother. What are you doing here? Ben did not answer until he reached the witness table. Something I should have done before the first fire. A district attorney's investigator stepped beside him. Ben had given a recorded statement that morning, with counsel present. The laptop belonged to Claire's campaign committee, but Susan Bell, the treasurer responsible for its records, had surrendered it voluntarily and signed a consent form permitting examination. Susan had not vanished to protect Claire. She had gone to the district attorney. Ben unlocked his phone. I gave Claire my access badge, he said. I signed the guardianship statement. I delayed maintenance reports and told residents Aunt Evelyn was forgetting things. The words reached every tenant behind me. He looked at me only once. I knew Claire wanted control of the building. I did not know she planned to start a fire. Claire stood. My brother is under enormous emotional strain. His daughter is seriously ill. Ben flinched but continued. She used Sophie's treatment to control me. Owen's foundation paid the first 6 months. Then Claire said the funding would stop unless I cooperated. That is false. Ben connected his phone to the chamber system. A voicemail filled the speakers. Claire's voice was unmistakable. Keep Evelyn in the East apartment Thursday night. Do not let her wander into the hall. Grant says the smoke will stay below the 3rd floor, but Owen needs the damage concentrated in that wing. Once the hardship report is signed, Sophie's grant becomes permanent. Claire did not move while her own words surrounded her. The message ended. Ben placed the phone on the table as though it had burned his hand. She left that after I refused to bring Aunt Evelyn back to Mercer Court. I went to confront her last night. Grant was there. He touched the bruise on his jaw. He told me accidents happen to children whose parents create problems. Owen rose again. I never approved threats against a child. Claire turned on him. You approved everything else. Her lawyer whispered for her to stop, but control had become more important to Claire than caution. I created a redevelopment plan, she snapped. You were the one who hired Grant. You designed the pressure failures. Owen said, you said minor incidents would create the inspection record. Nolan pushed his chair back. I relied on information provided by the management company. Anita placed a second folder before the clerk. The state recovered the native files from Inspector Briggs's city account. The screen displayed Nolan's original inspection photograph beside the version submitted after the laundry fire. The original showed a normal gauge reading and no damage around the valve. In the edited version, the gauge had been replaced with an older, low-pressure image. The timestamp had also been changed. A payment ledger appeared beside it. Civic Heritage Consulting had transferred $48,000 to a company owned by Nolan's wife. Nolan sat down. I was paid for consulting on what? Laura asked, how to photograph a fire before it happened. Several committee members turned away from him. Claire's wall of other people had collapsed. Grant had been caught at the valve. Nolan's files had been altered. Susan had surrendered the campaign computer. Ben had supplied her voicemail. Still, Claire reached for one final defense. Owen manipulated all of us. He promised a community project, then used contractors to manufacture violations. I may have concealed an investment, but I never ordered anyone to endanger residents. The district attorney's investigator opened the campaign laptop. Susan had preserved a spreadsheet titled Mercer Conversion Distribution and Contingencies. It listed projected demolition dates, political donations, contractor payments, Sophie's medical grant, and a line marked EM incapacity death clearance. Owen's name appeared beside 24% of the projected profit. Claire's shell company received 32%. But the file's author metadata did not belong to Owen, Grant, Susan, or Nolan. It belonged to Claire. The creation date was 18 months earlier, 3 weeks before she first contacted Owen Pike. She had not joined his scheme. She had designed it and recruited everyone else. Claire stared at her own name on the screen while the entire chamber finally understood who had lit the first match. Claire looked at her name on the spreadsheet as though someone else had typed it. For the first time since she entered politics, she had no audience left to persuade. The committee members who once praised her judgment moved their chairs away. Reporters stopped calling questions and began recording every expression. Behind me, the residents of Mercer Court sat in complete silence. Claire reached for the microphone. That file was created for internal scenario planning, she said. The language is being deliberately misinterpreted. The district attorney's investigator did not argue with her. He placed a printed warrant on the table. Claire Walsh, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, reckless endangerment, evidence tampering, public corruption, and financial fraud. Her attorney stood immediately. She will surrender voluntarily. There is no need for a public spectacle. Claire remained seated. You cannot arrest an elected official in the middle of a legislative proceeding. The proceeding was adjourned. The committee vice chair said quietly. Claire turned toward him. You would not have that seat without me. He looked down. 2 investigators approached from either side. They did not throw her onto the floor or drag her before the cameras. They asked her to stand, allowed her attorney to gather her handbag, and placed handcuffs around her wrists behind the privacy of a document folder. The restraint made the moment worse. There was no chaos for Claire to blame, no excessive force to transform into sympathy, only a lawful process moving forward without asking her permission. As they led her toward the side door, she stopped beside me. I had imagined this moment during many sleepless nights. I thought she might beg. I thought she might accuse me of choosing strangers over family. Instead, she whispered, you destroyed everything. I looked at the niece whose school photographs still sat in my apartment. No, I said, I stopped you from destroying what was never yours. Her face remained controlled until she saw the cameras waiting in the corridor. Then she lowered her head. Owen Pike was arrested before he left the chamber. Investigators seized his phones and informed him that the court had frozen the development accounts associated with Mercer Court. His attorneys surrounded him, but they could not hide the panic spreading through the men who had financed his projects. Grant Ellis was taken into custody at the building. Nolan Briggs surrendered his city badge before the afternoon ended. The mayor's office suspended him without pay, and the inspection division announced a review of every condemnation case he had handled during the previous 5 years. Susan Bell entered a cooperation agreement. She admitted she had created shell company filings and disguised campaign payments, but her preserved records gave prosecutors the map they needed to trace the money. Ben remained at the witness table after everyone else left. The residents filed slowly from the chamber. Some touched my shoulder, others passed without speaking. They had spent weeks frightened, displaced, and uncertain whom to believe. My victory did not return their homes that afternoon. Lena stopped beside Ben. "You helped them," she said. He nodded. "You also finally stopped helping them." She did not offer forgiveness, neither did I. Laura stood near the door with her briefcase closed. "The district attorney wants a formal statement from Ben tonight," she said. "He should have independent counsel." "I know." Ben looked at me. "Will you come with me?" The question nearly broke what remained of my composure. For most of his childhood, whenever fear became too large, he asked me to sit nearby. Dentist offices, school disciplinary meetings, the hospital after Sophie's diagnosis. This time, I could not be the person who made the consequences smaller. "No," I said, "but I will make sure you have a good lawyer." He lowered his eyes. "I understand." I do not think he did then. I barely did. The next 6 weeks were not the clean ending people expected after watching the City Hall recording. Mercer Court remained closed. The basement fire had damaged electrical conduits, and water from the earlier rupture had weakened plaster across 3 floors. The independent engineers found that repairs were possible, but expensive. Owen's emergency estimate had been inflated. The real cost was still more than $500,000. The frozen lakefront accounts contained funds traceable to fraudulent loans and city grants. A judge authorized part of that money to be preserved for tenant relocation and emergency stabilization, but legal ownership disputes delayed the larger repairs. The residents lived in hotels, spare rooms, and temporary apartments. Mrs. Novak asked me every Friday when she could return home. Each time I gave her the same answer: when it is truly safe. The words sounded different after everything Claire had done in the name of safety. I testified before a grand jury for nearly 7 hours. Prosecutors asked about the first pressure chart, the counterfeit seals, the guardianship petition, and Claire's plan for apartment 2E. They also asked whether I had ever promised Claire ownership of Mercer Court. I told them the truth. I had once expected her to inherit it. That answer stayed with me longer than any question about fire. Claire did not become a stranger when the handcuffs closed. She remained the child I had raised, and the woman who had tried to erase me. Both truths occupied the same space, and neither canceled the other. Ben pleaded guilty to unauthorized access, filing a false guardianship statement, and participating in a scheme to defraud the building. Prosecutors agreed not to charge him with the fires, because the evidence supported his claim that he had not known Grant intended physical sabotage. In return, he testified against Claire, Owen, and Nolan. Sophie's treatment funding ended when Owen's foundation accounts were frozen. Laura found a legitimate charitable program that covered most of the cost, but not all of it. I paid the remainder directly to the hospital. I did not do it for Ben. I did it because Sophie had not chosen any of this. 3 months after the hearing, the court rejected Claire's guardianship petition and restored my uncontested authority over Mercer Court. The city withdrew the permanent condemnation recommendation. Claire was formally removed from office after refusing to resign. Her campaign posters disappeared from storefronts. The development renderings came down. For years, Claire had built a public identity from photographs of herself standing beside vulnerable people. In the end, those same people watched her enter court. Same people watched her through a side entrance in county-issued clothing. One cold morning, I returned to my apartment at Lakeshore Haven and found a plain envelope beneath the door. There was no return address. I recognized the handwriting before I picked it up. Claire had written my name across the front. I carried the letter inside, placed it beside Daniel's photograph, and left it unopened. 10 months after the City Hall hearing, I stood beneath the restored entrance canopy of Mercer Court and watched the first residents come home. The brass letters above the door had been cleaned but not replaced. Daniel's original tile remained in the lobby, including the small blue piece near the mailboxes that never matched the others. Lena Ortiz entered first. She carried one suitcase and the same potted fern she had rescued on the night of the standpipe rupture. The fern looked worse than the building had after the fire, but Lena refused to throw it away. "Some things recover slowly," she said. I knew she was not talking about the plant misses. Novak returned with a new oxygen concentrator and 3 boxes of her late husband's papers. Mr. Bell's grandson ran ahead of him, stopping only when he reached the community room doors. Children filled the courtyard by noon. They drew houses, dogs, crooked suns, and one bright red fire engine across the bricks with sidewalk chalk. For the first time in nearly a year, Mercer Court sounded like a home instead of a case file. The repairs had taken longer than promised and cost more than anyone wanted. The city grants Claire had tried to use as leverage were reissued under independent oversight. Insurance covered part of the fire and water damage. A housing foundation supplied a low-interest restoration loan. I sold several investments Daniel and I had once considered untouchable. That decision hurt less than I expected. Money is only a legacy when it continues serving the values that created it. Otherwise, it is simply something people fight over after you are gone. Mercer Court no longer belonged entirely to me. That was the most important change. With Laura's help, we transferred the property into a community land trust. The trust owned the land and building. Residents elected 2 members of the governing board. A housing nonprofit selected 2 more. I retained 1 seat for the remainder of my life. But no single person, not me, not a relative, not a politician, could sell or redevelop the property alone. 30 years earlier, I would have considered that a loss of control. At 72, I understood it as protection. Malik Reed became Mercer Court's safety and facilities manager. He completed additional certification in fire protection systems and insisted that every valve, pump, inspection, and repair be documented in both digital and mechanical records. On the morning residents returned, I found him in the basement checking the diesel backup pump. "You tested it yesterday," I said. "I know, and the day before I know." Daniel would have liked him. A framed copy of the original pressure chart hung in the community room. Not the evidence itself, that remained stored with the court, but a clear reproduction of the line falling 7 minutes before the first fire. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Systems fail, records speak, people must choose whether to listen." Lena thought the wording was too serious. The children ignored it completely. That seemed healthy. Claire, Owen, Nolan, and Grant had all been convicted. Owen accepted a plea after financial records connected him to the contractor payments and false engineering reports. Nolan admitted falsifying inspections in exchange for money. Grant testified about the pressure failures and the basement fires, though prosecutors made clear that cooperation did not erase what he had done. Claire went to trial. She never admitted that she intended to harm me. Her attorneys argued that her comments about Apartment 2E were political exaggeration, that Owen had escalated the plan, and that the spreadsheet described possibilities rather than instructions. The jury disagreed. She was convicted of conspiracy, arson-related offenses, public corruption, and financial fraud. I attended only the first and last days. At sentencing, Claire looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, simply reduced to the size of one person without a staff, a platform, or a room arranged to admire her. The judge asked whether I wished to speak. I said I did not. Everything necessary had already been placed into the record. Months earlier, I finally opened the letter she had sent from jail. It contained 4 pages. The first 2 blamed Owen, the third blamed me. On the last page, she wrote that she still remembered the purple backpack she brought to our house after her mother died. She remembered Daniel teaching her to ride a bicycle and me sitting beside her bed during thunderstorms. She said she did not understand how she had become someone capable of using those memories against us. That was the closest she came to an apology. I did not answer. Remorse may begin with words, but accountability requires living inside the consequences without demanding that the injured person make them easier. I kept the letter. I did not keep it because I forgave her. I kept it because the child she had been was real, even though the woman she became was also real. Healing did not require me to choose one truth and erase the other. Ben's path was quieter. He served probation, completed community service, and lost his maintenance position permanently. For several months, he did not contact me except through Laura. Then he began showing up on Saturday mornings. He did not ask to come inside. He repaired donated furniture in the courtyard workshop, drove elderly residents to appointments, and helped Sophie with schoolwork, while she continued treatment under the legitimate charity program. He never asked when I would forgive him. That was the first sign he understood what forgiveness was not. One morning I handed him a box of Daniel's old tools. These belong with someone who will use them carefully, I said. Ben held the box against his chest. Does this mean? It means you may come back next Saturday. His eyes filled, but he nodded instead of reaching for me. Trust returned in measurements too small for cameras. A kept appointment, an honest answer. A door closed gently rather than secretly. On the evening Mercer Court reopened, I sat alone in the courtyard after everyone went upstairs. Warm light filled the windows. Somewhere on the third floor, a child practiced the same piano scale repeatedly. Pipes moved water through the walls with familiar knocks. I thought of Daniel. For years, I believed protecting our legacy meant keeping the building exactly as we had left it. I had been wrong. Buildings survive through repair. Families survive only when truth is allowed inside, even when it changes the shape of everything. The pressure chart behind the community room glass no longer looked like the beginning of my defeat. It was the moment the building told me the truth, and this time, I listened. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who has ever been told they were too old, too emotional, or too powerless to recognize what was happening around them. Sometimes dignity is not found in holding on to everything. Sometimes it is found in knowing what must be protected and what must finally be released.